The bare bulb hanging from the kitchen ceiling cast a stark, unforgiving light on Mark's hands as they rested, trembling slightly, on the worn linoleum tabletop. Between them lay the evidence of his failure, a single $20 bill, not crisp and promising, but softened with wear, folded and refolded until the creases were permanent, mocking him with its flimsy inadequacy. Outside, the city murmured its indifferent lullaby, a distant siren wailing like a lost soul. But inside apartment 2B, the silence was thick, heavy, broken only by the occasional soft sigh drifting from the shared bedroom where 6 children slept, 6 innocent hearts beating in peaceful oblivion, unaware that their father, their protector, was staring absolute emptiness in the face. It was almost midnight, the hour when shadows deepen and anxieties, held at bay by the frantic pace of the day, creep out to feast on a man's resolve. Mark squeezed his eyes shut, the image of the pantry shelf seared into his mind, a near-empty bag of rice, 2 cans of dented green beans, half a jar of peanut butter. Enough for what? A meager breakfast? Maybe a thin lunch? And then the question hung there, a suffocating weight pressing down on his chest, making it hard to draw a full breath. He could feel the familiar cold tendrils of panic starting to snake around his gut. Tomorrow wasn't just another day. It was a precipice, milk or electricity. Bus fare maybe chase a dead-end job lead, or enough pasta to fill 6 small bellies for one more night. The choices were impossible, each leading down a path he dreaded. He was failing them, his kids, his world. Suddenly, a sound shattered the oppressive quiet. Sharp, insistent. Knock, knock. Mark's head snapped up, his heart instantly slamming against his ribs like a trapped bird, every muscle tensed. He wasn't expecting anyone. No one came here this late. His mind, already frayed, snagged on thorns of fear. The landlord? Had Mr. Henderson finally reached the end of his patience with the late rent? Or worse, much worse? He held his breath, listening. Silence returned, amplifying the frantic pounding in his ears. Had he imagined it? Then knock, knock, knock. Louder this time. Undeniable. Someone was standing right outside his door in the dead of night. A cold dread, different from a gnawing anxiety about money, washed over him. This felt invasive, threatening. Yet, beneath the fear, a desperate, illogical flicker of something else sparked. Could it possibly be help? The thought was absurd, instantly dismissed. Still, the sound hung there, a question mark demanding an answer, promising that the fragile, desperate stillness of his life was about to be irrevocably broken. Mark wasn't just a man. He was a single father multiplied by 6. A role forged in love and loss when his wife, Sarah, had succumbed to a swift, brutal illness 2 years prior, leaving him the sole anchor for their sprawling, boisterous family. Their apartment, nestled on the 2nd floor of a tired brick building, was small, almost comically so for 7 people. But Sarah had made a home, and Mark clung fiercely to the remnants of her touch. The cheerful yellow curtains she'd sewn, now slightly faded, the mismatched photo frames crowding the mantelpiece, filled with smiling faces from brighter days. Now, the space felt perpetually cramped, overflowing with the vibrant chaos of childhood. A rogue sock hiding under the sofa, a half-finished Lego tower on the coffee table, crayon drawings, so many drawings, taped proudly to every available surface, tiny sneakers and worn boots forming a jumbled welcoming committee by the door. From 14-year-old Jake, all gangly limbs and simmering teenage frustration, wrestling with math problems that made Mark's own head spin, down to sweet 4-year-old Lily, whose belief in closet monsters was absolute and required nightly reassurance. They were his reason for breathing. His days were a relentless cycle, starting long before the sun dared to peek over the city skyline. Waking the sleepy brood, navigating breakfast like a short-order cook in a whirlwind, packing lunches with dwindling supplies, refereeing squabbles over shared toys, and orchestrating the complex ballet of getting everyone out the door, somewhat clean and vaguely on time. It had been manageable, just barely, when he had a construction job. The work was hard, physical, leaving him aching but satisfied, the paycheck steady enough to keep their heads above water. But 3 months ago, the call had come. Downsizing. Last hired, first fired. Just like that, the ground beneath his feet had vanished. The severance pay evaporated quickly, eaten by rent, utilities, and the insatiable needs of 6 growing children. Daycare for Lily and 6-year-old Ben became an impossible luxury, forcing Mark to rely on Jake and 10-year-old Maya to watch the younger ones after school, a responsibility that weighed heavily on them all. His job search became a soul-crushing exercise in futility, trudging miles across the city because he couldn't always afford bus fare, handing out resumes that felt increasingly inadequate, facing polite dismissals or the deafening silence of unanswered emails. He tried everything: warehouses, delivery services, janitorial work, but nothing stuck. Sometimes he'd find a day's labor here and there, cash-in-hand work that provided a temporary reprieve, but no real security. Evenings were a blur of homework supervision, attempt at cheerful dinner conversations over bowls of plain pasta or rice and beans, bath time routines that inevitably involved flooded floors, and story time, where he'd read in a voice thick with exhaustion until the younger ones drifted off. He tucked them in, smoothing hair, whispering reassurances he didn't feel himself. He'd linger in their doorway, watching the gentle rise and fall of their chests, the fierce love swelling inside him so potent hurt, quickly followed by the icy grip of fear. How much longer could he keep this up? What would happen when the $20 ran out? Would they lose the apartment? Would they be separated? The thoughts were vultures circling, waiting. He put on a brave face. He deflected Jake's anxious questions about the overdue notices piling up. He pretended not to see Maya's worried glances at the nearly empty fridge. He manufactured smiles and promised treats he knew he couldn't deliver. But inside, the carefully constructed facade was crumbling. The isolation felt immense. His parents lived halfway across the country, struggling with their own health issues. Sarah's family offered sympathy but little else. His friends, mostly former co-workers, were facing their own battles in the uncertain economy. He was adrift, solely responsible for 6 precious lives, and the tide was going out fast. Tonight, staring at that final, pathetic bill, the loneliness was a physical ache, a hollow pit in his stomach that echoed the emptiness of the pantry. He felt like a failure, a fraud, and utterly, terrifyingly alone. Knock, knock, knock. The sound pulled him sharply back to the present danger, or possibility. He couldn't decide which was worse. Moving silently, careful not to wake the children, Mark crept towards the door. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden silence. He pressed his eye to the peephole, the distorted fisheye lens revealing the dimly lit hallway. There she stood, an elderly woman, smaller than he'd first thought, slightly stooped within a thick, hand-knitted cardigan that looked too warm for the mild spring night. Wisps of white hair escaped a neat bun, framing a face deeply lined, not with harshness, but with the intricate map of a long life lived. Her eyes, magnified by the lens, seemed surprisingly bright. Fixed on his door with an expression of calm determination mixed with was that concern? He racked his brain. Had he seen her watering plants in a nearby yard? Maybe sitting on a bench at the bus stop? There was a vague familiarity, but he couldn't place her. Definitely not the landlord. Not anyone official. Just an old woman. Why? The question echoed in his mind. Why was she here? At this hour? Caution, honed by months of vulnerability, screamed at him. Don't open the door. Ignore it. She'll go away. It's too risky, too strange. What if it was a scam? A trick? Yet something held him there. Perhaps it was the sheer unexpectedness of it. Or maybe something in her posture, a quiet solidity, a lack of threat. She didn't look agitated or demanding, just present, waiting. He could feel her presence on the other side of the thin wood, a silent insistence. His hand hovered over the deadbolt, indecision making his fingers tremble. Another knock, softer this time, was accompanied by a low, slightly quavering voice. "Hello? Is anyone home? Please, I just need a moment." Taking a ragged breath, Mark made a decision. He slid the deadbolt back with a soft click, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. But he kept the chain firmly latched, a meager barrier of security. He pulled the door open just a few inches, the chain straining taut, revealing a narrow slice of the hallway and the woman standing patiently within it. "Can I help you?" His voice was rougher than he intended, thick with sleep and suspicion. He couldn't quite mask. The woman didn't flinch. She took a small, respectful step back from the door, acknowledging the implied boundary of the chain. Her eyes met his through the gap, and they were clear, direct, holding none of the menaces fear had conjured. Instead, they held a surprising depth of understanding. "Oh, good evening. I am so deeply sorry to disturb you at this late hour." Her voice was gentle, cultured with the soft tremor of age. "My name is Eleanor Gable. I live just down the block on Maple Street, number 32. Mark frowned. Maple Street. That was easily 3, maybe 4 blocks away. An older woman, walking alone this late? It didn't make sense. What could she possibly want from him? He remained silent, waiting, his suspicion warring with a weary curiosity. Eleanor twisted the edge of her cardigan sleeve between her fingers, a small, nervous gesture. "Forgive me, young man. This is highly irregular. I know." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "You see, I sometimes have trouble sleeping. An old habit. And I find a late-night walk can help clear my head. The streets are quiet then. Peaceful." She hesitated again, her gaze flickering past him for a fraction of a second, as if peering into the dim apartment beyond. "And I've noticed your light. It's often on quite late when I pass by on my walks. I've seen you, sometimes, coming home in the evenings. You always look, you look like you're carrying a very heavy burden. If you don't mind my saying so." Mark's unease spiked. She had been watching him, observing him. The idea felt intrusive, unsettling. Was she some kind of busybody? He almost closed the door right then. Sensing his withdrawal, she rushed to explain, her tone earnest. "Please, I don't mean to pry. Truly, it's just, tonight I was cooking. I made a casserole, tuna noodle, nothing special, and as often happens these days, my eyes were bigger than my stomach. I made far too much for just one person." She held up a foil-covered dish, rectangular and reassuringly solid, cradled carefully in both hands. Steam escaped faintly from under the foil's edges, carrying a warm, savory aroma that drifted through a crack in the door, the scent of baked pasta, cheese, maybe onions. It smelled undeniably comforting. It smelled like food, real hot food, and I thought on my walk, seeing your light again, I wondered, perhaps your family might be able to make use of it. It seemed such a waste otherwise. She offered a small, tentative smile, her head tilted slightly, her expression open, hopeful. Mark stared at her, then down at the dish. A battle raged within him. His pride recoiled at the thought of accepting charity from a complete stranger, a woman who had apparently been observing his struggles from afar. It felt embarrassing, shameful. His suspicion whispered warnings. Why would anyone do this? What did she really want? But then his stomach gave a low, traitorous rumble. He thought of the empty pantry shelves. He thought of Jake's too-thin frame, of Lily asking yesterday why they couldn't have the cheesy noodles she liked anymore. Just then, from the back bedroom, came a soft, sleepy cough, followed by a child's murmur. Lily. Eleanor's gaze instantly softened, her eyes filled with unmistakable warmth, directed towards the sound. "You have children?" she asked softly, the question gentle, not accusatory. Mark swallowed, the knot of pride loosening slightly under the weight of his paternal responsibility. "Yes, 6. The word came out quiet, heavy with the reality it represented. Eleanor's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, but her expression didn't falter. Instead, a look of profound empathy settled on her features. "Oh, my goodness. 6. What a blessing. And what a tremendous undertaking for you." Her gaze returned to the casserole dish she held out. "Please, allow me this small gesture. No strings attached. Just let an old woman feel useful. Think of it as neighborliness, even if we aren't immediate neighbors." He looked from her kind, lined face, etched with sincerity, to the simple offering she held. The aroma was stronger now, filling the small gap between them. The immediate, pressing need, the need to feed his children, the need for just one small thing to go right, finally overwhelmed the lingering suspicion and bruised pride. With a sigh that felt like it released weeks of tension, Mark fumbled with the chain lock, his fingers clumsy. He slid it free and pulled the door open wider. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, her skin surprisingly soft, papery thin, as he took the dish. It was heavy, warm, radiating a comforting heat that seeped into his cold hands. "Thank you," he mumbled, the words feeling utterly inadequate. "Thank you very much, Mrs. Gable." "Eleanor, please," she corrected gently, her eyes crinkling at the corners in a genuine smile. "Just Eleanor. And you are most welcome, Mark." He hadn't told her his name. She must have seen it on the mailbox. She gave him one last look, a look that seemed to hold a complex mixture of sadness and satisfaction, then nodded quietly. "Good night, Mark. Sleep well." She turned and walked slowly down the dimly lit hallway, her footsteps soft on the worn carpet, until she disappeared around the corner, leaving Mark standing alone in his doorway, holding an unexpected gift, the warmth spreading from the dish through his hands and into his chest. He closed the door, carefully relocking the deadbolt, relatching the chain out of habit. He carried the casserole into the kitchen and placed it on the table, right next to the lonely $20 bill. The absurdity of the moment, a midnight casserole delivery from a mystery benefactor, wasn't lost on him, but beneath the bewilderment, something else stirred, a fragile, unfamiliar warmth, not just from the dish, but somewhere deeper inside. He didn't understand it, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the future seemed perhaps just a tiny bit less bleak. The following day, the aroma of the reheating casserole filled the cramped apartment, a rich, cheesy scent that promised delight. For lunch, Mark served generous portions onto plates that had held far too much plain rice lately. The children gathered around the table, their eyes wide, their chatter momentarily silenced by anticipation. They ate with an eagerness that both warmed and broke Mark's heart. Jake, usually quiet and reserved, managed a rare smile between mouthfuls. Maya hummed happily. Even the usually picky twins, Sam and Chloe, cleaned their plates without complaint. Little Ben smeared cheese sauce gleefully across his cheeks, and Lily declared the bestest cheesy noodles ever. Mark watched them, savoring their simple joy, the sound of their contented eating a balm to his weary soul. The casserole wasn't just food. It was a moment of normalcy, a taste of abundance in their constricted world. He ate his own portion slowly, the warm, comforting flavors chasing away some of the lingering chill of desperation. Gratitude wore with residual unease about Eleanor, but the undeniable relief her gift provided was winning. He half expected never to see Eleanor again, figuring the midnight casserole was a one-off impulse of eccentric kindness. But 3 afternoons later, as he walked back from a fruitless trip to drop off yet another resume, he saw her approaching on the sidewalk. This time, she carried 2 familiar plastic grocery bags, handles stretched taut. She spotted him and waved, a friendly, unassuming gesture. "Mark, hello?" she called out as she drew near, just coming from the market down the street. They had a wonderful special on milk and eggs. 2 for 1. But heavens, what's a single person to do with 2 gallons of milk before it turns? She chuckled softly, a pleasant, tinkling sound. "I was hoping perhaps your family could use the extra, and I picked up some bread and fruit too. Looked too good to pass up." She held out one of the bags, her expression open and guileless. Mark hesitated for only a heartbeat. Yesterday's relief was still palpable. The image of his children's happy faces lingered. Okay, he thought, maybe this is just kindness. He took the bag, heavier than he expected, feeling the cool firmness of a milk jug, the reassuring weight of a loaf of bread, the roundness of apples. "Eleanor, this is too much." "Thank you." "Seriously." "Nonsense." She waved his thanks away with a gentle flutter of her hand. "It's practical, really. Saves me having to pour good milk down the drain in a week. Waste not, want not, you know." She didn't pry or ask questions, just chatted for a moment about the surprisingly warm weather before wishing him a good afternoon, and continuing on her way, leaving Mark standing there with a bag full of precious necessities. This became the new, tentative rhythm of their lives. Every few days, Eleanor would appear, seemingly by chance. Sometimes it was another small offering of groceries, a bag of potatoes, a bunch of carrots, a box of cereal she claimed she'd bought by mistake. Sometimes she arrived with a cardboard box filled with neatly folded clothes. "My niece is clearing out her children's closets," she'd explain casually. "Thought some of these might fit your youngsters before they go to the donation bin." Miraculously, many of them did, filling gaps in wardrobes worn thin from too many washes. Another time, it was a stack of well-loved picture books and a couple of sturdy board games with all their pieces intact. "Keeps the mind active," she remarked with a smile. Gradually, their encounter stretched beyond the simple exchange of goods. Eleanor seemed to have an uncanny knack for appearing when Mark was outside juggling groceries or trying to manage the kids' departure for school. She started asking after the children by name, remembering that Jake loved soccer, that Maya was learning the recorder, that Lily had a favorite blue stuffed rabbit. How did she know these things? Had he mentioned them? He couldn't recall. She began engaging him in brief, gentle conversations. How was his day? Any luck on the job front? She never pressed for details if he seemed reluctant, but her listening was active, attentive. She'd nod sympathetically, her eyes reflecting genuine concern. One day, she mentioned casually, "Oh, I happened to notice a help wanted sign in the window of the public library when I returned my books yesterday. Just for shelving duties. Part-time, I think. Might not be much, but perhaps worth looking into?" Mark found himself, surprisingly, starting to open up, not a deluge, but small trickles of his daily reality. The frustration of another rejection letter. The small victory of fixing a squeaky door hinge. The way Ben had finally learned to tie his shoes. He admitted how much that first casserole had truly meant, arriving at his absolute lowest point. Eleanor listened without judgment, her quiet presence strangely comforting. She didn't offer unsolicited advice or easy platitudes. Instead, she'd sometimes share a small piece of her own life in return. A fond memory of her late husband, Arthur, meticulously tending his rose bushes. A quiet observation about the changing seasons. She mentioned she volunteered at the hospital gift shop on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Gave her somewhere to be. she'd said simply. These fragments painted a picture of a woman living a quiet, perhaps lonely life, yet possessing an extraordinary capacity for noticing the world and the people around her. One particularly trying afternoon, Mark was attempting to assemble a second-hand bookshelf he'd found on the curb, the instructions seeming deliberately obscure, parts scattered across the living room floor. Lily and Ben, denied access to their usual play space, were chasing each other noisily around the kitchen, their shrieks escalating. Mark's patience was wearing thin. Just as he felt his temper about to fray completely, a soft knock came at the door. It was Eleanor. "Goodness! Sounds like quite the project you have there," she observed, peering past him at the chaotic scene with an amused twinkle in her eye. "And these two seem full of energy today." She smiled warmly at Lily and Ben, who paused their game to stare at her. Mark ran a hand through his hair, sighing, "Yeah, it's something. And these two are driving me up the wall." Eleanor's smile softened with understanding. "Well," she said thoughtfully, "I was just on my way to the little park at the end of Maple Street. It's such a lovely afternoon. Would it be a help if I took these energetic sprites with me for an hour or so? Give you a chance to wrestle with that contraption in peace?" Mark stared at her. He'd only known her a few weeks. Entrusting his youngest children to her care felt like a huge leap. His protective instincts screamed caution. But then he looked at her calm, kind face, at the genuine offer in her eyes. He looked at the jumble of bookshelf parts. He heard Lily giggle as Eleanor winked at her. He thought of the consistent, quiet support she had offered, never asking for anything in return. "Okay," he said, making a decision suddenly. "Okay, Eleanor. That would be amazing. Thank you." He quickly gave her his cell phone number, rattled off instructions about holding hands and staying within sight, and felt a pang of anxiety as he watched her walk away down the street, Lily's small hand tucked trustingly in hers, Ben chattering excitedly beside her. But the hour of uninterrupted quiet that followed was incredibly productive. He managed to decipher the instructions and assemble the bookshelf. When Eleanor returned precisely an hour later with two happy, slightly flushed children clutching fistfuls of dandelions, the relief and gratitude Mark felt were immense. That afternoon marked a subtle shift, a bridge of trust, painstakingly built with small acts of kindness and quiet observation, now felt sturdier. Mark started looking out his window around the times Eleanor usually took her walks, offering a wave if he saw her. He asked about her volunteer work, listened to her stories about the hospital. He learned she missed having family nearby, that her own daughters lived far away. He realized her kindness wasn't just directed at him. It was part of who she was, perhaps amplified by her own quiet solitude. It still wasn't entirely logical, this connection forged from a midnight knock and a casserole. But it felt increasingly real. Her steady, unassuming presence had become a quiet anchor in the turbulence of his life, a reminder that even in the depths of struggle, unexpected pockets of warmth and decency could still be found. He still didn't fully grasp her motives, but he was beginning to rely on her gentle support more than he cared to admit, even to himself. Weeks melted into a month, then nearly 2. Mark had managed to string together a few more odd jobs, helping a neighbor move, a day of painting. Enough to keep the absolute wolves from the door, but the fundamental insecurity remained. The library job hadn't worked out. The hours directly conflicted with school pickup times. Eleanor's intermittent help with groceries and occasional bill payment were lifelines, but Mark knew they weren't sustainable solutions. The weight of responsibility still settled heavily on his shoulders each night after the children were asleep. Then came an evening that felt different. The older children, Jake, Maya, Sam, and Chloe, were spread around the kitchen table, heads bent over homework, the scratching of pencils and the occasional frustrated sigh filling the air. The scent of cheap spaghetti sauce lingered from dinner. Mark was washing dishes, his mind already calculating how to stretch the remaining food until his next hopeful payday, when a familiar soft knock sounded. He dried his hands and opened the door to find Eleanor standing there. Her usual gentle smile was present, but tonight it seemed overlaid with a quiet seriousness, a sense of purpose in her eyes. "Mark," she began, her voice calm but carrying a new weight. "Forgive me for intruding on your evening, but may I come in for a few minutes? There's something rather important I'd like to discuss with you, if you have a moment." Her formality surprised him. Usually, their interactions were more casual, doorstep chats or brief encounters on the street. "Come in, Eleanor, of course," he said, stepping aside and gesturing towards the kitchen. The children looked up as she entered, murmuring polite hellos before returning to their work. Sensing a shift in the atmosphere, Eleanor greeted them warmly, then walked towards the kitchen table. Pulling out one of the mismatched wooden chairs, the one with the slight wobble Mark kept meaning to fix, she sat down, folded her hands neatly in her lap, her gaze steady as she waited for Mark to sit opposite her. He did so, a knot of nervous anticipation tightening in his stomach. What was this about? Had he done something wrong? Had she decided she could no longer help? "Mark," she began again, her voice low and clear, meeting his eyes directly across the worn tabletop. "I feel I owe you something of an explanation. I haven't been entirely transparent about my reasons for helping you and your family." Mark waited, holding his breath slightly. "It wasn't just a chance encounter that first night," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "It wasn't simply that I saw your light on late, or that I coincidentally had an extra casserole. Those things were true, yes, but they were convenient truths, not the whole truth." She paused, taking a slow, deliberate breath, as if gathering the strength to voice something long held inside. "Years ago, Mark, I had a son. My Michael." She spoke the name softly, love and old, deep pain mingling in her tone. "He passed away. It's been quite some time now." "I'm so sorry," Eleanor, Mark murmured, taken aback by this sudden, deeply personal revelation. She acknowledged the sympathy with a slight nod, her eyes momentarily clouding over. "Thank you. Michael, he was a good man, a wonderful father. For several years before he met his second wife, he was a single parent, raising his two little girls on his own after his first marriage ended unexpectedly. He worked in construction, just like you mentioned you did. And he struggled, Mark." She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping, becoming thick with emotion. "Oh, how he struggled. Financially, emotionally, trying to juggle work and childcare, trying to be everything for those girls." Her gaze drifted towards Mark's children, bent over their schoolwork, then returned to Mark's face, filled with profound, sorrowful understanding. "He was so proud, my Michael, stubbornly proud. He wouldn't accept help easily, not even from me, his own mother. He wanted to do it all himself. He put on such a brave face, but I could see the strain behind his eyes, the exhaustion, the worry. He worked himself into the ground trying to provide. Watching you these past couple of months," she went on, her voice regaining some steadiness, "seeing your devotion to these beautiful children, witnessing how hard you work, remembering the sheer exhaustion I saw etched on your face that first night at the door, it was like seeing Michael all over again. It brought back all the times I wished I could have helped him more, done something more concrete. Before we lost him, it stirred up old regrets." Mark listened, captivated, a powerful sense of shared experience washing over him. He understood that pride. He understood that desperation masked by a brave face. Eleanor took another deep breath. "My husband, Arthur, he passed away 5 years ago. He was a very practical man, very grounded, but kind. He worried about people like Michael, people who were hard-working and responsible, but just couldn't catch a break. People who fell through the gaps in the system. Before he died, He did something rather unexpected. He used a portion of his savings to set up a small, anonymous fund through our church. He called it the Community Hand-Up Fund. His idea was not charity in the traditional sense, but providing specific, targeted assistance to help deserving families regain their footing. A strategic boost, he called it, not a handout, but a hand up toward stability. Since Arthur's passing, I've been quietly administering the fund. It's very small, very discreet. I look for situations where a specific intervention could make a genuine, lasting difference. She looked Mark directly in the eye. That first night, Mark, it wasn't just a light. Weeks before that, I was standing behind you in the checkout line at the corner grocery. I saw you carefully count your change. I saw you hesitate, then reluctantly put back that small packet of cheese your little girl was pointing at. I saw the look on your face as you did it, that mixture of frustration and quiet sadness. It stuck with me. And then just a few days before I knocked on your door, I was walking past the park down the street. Your little Lily, she was sitting on the swings, talking to her teddy bear. She didn't see me. I heard her say, clear as day, I wish Daddy didn't look so sad all the time. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes as she recounted the story. That's what solidified it for me, Mark. Hearing that innocent wish, it broke my heart. That knock at midnight. Believe me, it wasn't easy. I paced my living room for nearly an hour beforehand. I worried sick that I would offend you, that you'd think I was some interfering old busybody. But I kept thinking of Michael. I kept hearing Lily's little voice. I knew I had to try. Arthur would have wanted me to try. She reached into the worn leather handbag resting on her lap and retrieved a plain white envelope. She slid it gently across the table towards him. This isn't just another bag of groceries, Mark, she said softly. Arthur believed firmly in empowering people, fostering independence. Inside this envelope, you'll find confirmation of a job interview I arranged for you. It's at a logistics warehouse over on the industrial estate, Franklin Logistics. The manager, a Mr. David Miller, was an old acquaintance of Arthur's. I spoke with him, explained the situation discreetly. He needs reliable workers. It's full-time, Mark. Stable hours, benefits, decent pay. And the shift, second shift, should align much better with the children's school schedule. Mr. Miller is expecting you to call him tomorrow to set up the interview time. Mark stared at the envelope as if it might bite him. His hand trembled as he reached for it, his fingers brushing the smooth paper. And there's one more thing in there, Eleanor added, her voice barely above a whisper. A receipt for your overdue electricity bill. I took the liberty of paying it through the fund. Please consider an investment. An investment from Arthur. Really, an investment in your family's future, in giving you the breathing room to get back on your feet. The air seemed to crackle with the weight of her revelation, the careful planning, the targeted, practical help, the connection to her own past pain, to her late husband's quiet foresight. It wasn't random charity. It was a meticulously crafted lifeline, offered with profound empathy and respect. It was the answer to 1,000 desperate, silent prayers. He looked from the pristine white envelope to Eleanor's earnest face, now streaked with quiet tears. The dam inside him, the one holding back months, years of pent-up fear, grief, stress, and the crushing weight of single fatherhood, finally gave way. He picked up the envelope, his fingers thick and clumsy as he tore it open. Inside lay the printed email confirmation of the interview appointment, and beneath it, the utility company receipt stamped boldly, paid in full. He stared at the words, the black ink blurring his hot. Stinging tears filled his eyes and began to spill down his cheeks. He tried to look up, to speak, but the knot in his throat was too tight. A strangled sob escaped him. He covered his face with his hands, his broad shoulders shaking with the force of the emotion overwhelming him. It wasn't just relief, It was a shattering release of months of terror, of feeling utterly alone and inadequate. Around the table, the children fell silent, their eyes wide, fixed on their father. Jake, looking alarmed, hesitantly reached out and put a hand on Mark's shaking arm. "Dad, are you okay?" Mark lowered his hands, scrubbing furiously at his wet cheeks. He looked across at Eleanor, his voice choked and thick when he finally managed to speak. "Eleanor, I have no words." He shook his head, tears still flowing freely. "That night, the $20, you have no idea. I was at the end. Completely. I felt like I was drowning, like I was failing them every single day." His gaze swept over his children, who were now watching him with open concern. You didn't just bring us food," he stammered, gesturing helplessly. "You didn't just pay a bill. You brought light back into this house. You showed me that someone saw me, that someone actually cared." The sheer, raw gratitude poured out of him, unfiltered. It felt like a physical weight lifting from his soul. Eleanor reached across the table, her small, age-spotted hand covering Mark's large, trembling one. Tears streamed down her own face now, tears of empathy, of shared humanity, perhaps of healing her own old wounds. "Oh, Mark, my dear boy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Kindness is never an intrusion when it's offered with respect. And being able to help you, to use Arthur's fund in the way he intended, it means more to me than you know. Michael would have understood. He would be so glad." The emotional charge in the small kitchen was immense. Jake, sensing profound significance of the moment, even without understanding all the details, shyly retrieved a drawing from his backpack. He slid across the table towards Eleanor. It depicted a stick-figure family with 6 children, holding hands with a smiling stick-figure woman with distinct white hair, all standing under a brightly shining sun. I drew this for you, Grandma Eleanor," he mumbled, his cheeks turning red. The name slipped out naturally, instinctively. Eleanor picked up the drawing, her watery smile widening into one of pure delight. "Oh, Jake, it's absolutely wonderful. Thank you. I shall treasure it." Just then, Lily, roused by the unusual quiet followed by the sounds of choked emotion, padded into the kitchen in her footy pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Seeing her daddy crying and Eleanor crying too, she made a beeline for Mark's lap, clambering up and wrapping her small arms tightly around his neck in a fierce, protective hug. "Daddy sad?" she murmured into his shoulder. Then she turned her large, solemn eyes to Eleanor. Without a word, she reached out a tiny hand and gently patted Eleanor's arm, a simple, instinctive gesture of comfort that spoke volumes. Mark hugged Lily close, burying his face in her soft hair for a moment, overwhelmed. He looked back at Eleanor, his eyes brimming, no longer with tears of despair, but with tears of profound, life-altering gratitude. The worn kitchen, usually echoing with boisterous energy, felt sacred in that moment, filled not with chaos, but with a quiet, powerful glow of compassion, connection, and the breathtaking beauty of unexpected grace. The job interview at Franklin Logistics was a success. Mark started work the following Monday. The hours were long, the work physically demanding, shifting heavy boxes in the cavernous warehouse, but Mark attacked it with renewed vigor. Every bead of sweat felt purposeful, every ache a badge of honor. It was a steady paycheck. It was stability. It was a future. Slowly, incrementally, life in apartment 2B began to recalibrate. The pantry shelves remained stocked. Mark could afford new sneakers for Jake when he shot up another inch, art supplies for Maya, proper winter coats for the twins as the seasons turned. He enrolled Lily and Ben in an affordable after-school program near the school, relieving Jake and Maya of the constant burden of supervision and giving Mark peace of mind during his shift. The oppressive cloud of financial anxiety that had shadowed Mark for so long began to dissipate, replaced by the manageable stress of juggling work and family. The haunted look in his eyes faded, replaced by a tired but genuine warmth. He laughed more easily, his deep chuckle rumbling through the apartment again. He had patience for homework struggles, energy for bedtime stories. The apartment itself seemed brighter, lighter, filled with the sounds of family healing, moving forward. Eleanor remained a constant, cherished presence. She wasn't just a kind stranger who had intervened. She truly became Grandma Eleanor. She attended school plays, helped chaperone a field trip, taught Maya how to knit. Sunday dinners often included her now, her quiet presence a calming counterpoint to the children's lively chatter. She'd sit at the kitchen table, sipping tea, listening to their stories, offering gentle advice to Mark when he sought it, sharing anecdotes about Arthur or Michael, bridging the gap between generations and circumstances. Her kindness hadn't been a temporary fix. It had been a catalyst for building a new, extended family, woven together by threads of empathy and mutual respect. Mark never forgot the chilling desperation of that midnight hour, staring at his last $20. The memory remained, not as a source of shame, but as a stark reminder of how quickly fortunes could change, and how profoundly a single act of courage and compassion could alter a life's trajectory. He found himself looking at people differently now. The tired cashier at the grocery store, the quiet man sitting alone on the bus, the stressed young mother juggling toddlers in the park. He saw their potential struggles with new eyes. One crisp autumn Saturday, Mark was walking home from an errand when he saw Mr. Henderson, his elderly neighbor from the first floor, wrestling with several heavy bags of groceries at the building entrance. Without hesitation, Mark hurried over. "Morning, Mr. Henderson. Let me give you a hand with those." He easily lifted the bags, carrying them up the stairs for the grateful older man, chatting about the weather as they went. It was a small thing, easily done, but it felt significant. It was a conscious choice to pay forward the kindness he had received, to be the person who sees, the person who offers help without being asked. The echo of that fateful knock at midnight never truly faded. It resonated not with fear, but with the enduring power of human connection. It was a testament to Eleanor's quiet bravery, stepping out her own solitude, driven by empathy born from loss, to reach out to a stranger in need. Her actions prove that kindness, even when it feels risky or intrusive, can be a powerful force for transformation. It hadn't just provided temporary relief. It had forged an unlikely, beautiful bond, repaired fractured hope, and sent ripples of warmth cascading outwards, a luminous reminder that even in the deepest shadows, the simple, courageous act of choosing to connect, to help, to truly see one another, holds a power to change everything.